HSBC has embarked on a global restructuring that will now shrink headcounts, close off large markets and possibly relocate headquarters away from London. I'm joined by the banker's editor, Brian Caplen, to discuss what will happen with HSBC and does this mark the true end of global banking?
Well, I think HSBC, like the other global banks, since the financial crisis, has faced a number of problems. Obviously, one of them has been that banking revenues have disappeared in many sections, particularly in the investment banking area, whereas costs are huge. I mean, the IT costs of running a big bank like HSBC are absolutely massive. And then on top of that, you've had all the costs from regulation, compliance, and of course, for all the big banks, fines for misdemeanors, in HSBC's case, problems with over money laundering in Mexico, or failing to prevent money laundering in Mexico, and things like the private banking problems in Switzerland. So when you start to add all that up, if you're the CEO, you've got some big decisions to take. And HSBC is now embarking on its second wave of restructuring, because they started one in 2010, taking costs out, taking jobs out, selling off bits of the business that didn't seem to make sense.
But also making sure that there will still remain in the bigger major markets that seem to be the most profitable at the time, although now they are almost entirely closing off Brazil, leaving Turkey.
Well, that's right. That's what's interesting about this new restructuring is that, Brazil and Turkey are obviously major emerging markets. So to withdraw from those markets is hugely significant. I think the rationale behind it is that, they're not big players in those markets. And I think most banks need to be 2 or 3 in the market in order to have a kind of viable business model. So what you're going to end up with HSBC is basically a bank where perhaps 40 or 50% of its earnings now are coming from Asia. A little bit like it was back in the 90s before it expanded itself to become a global bank.
Which also brings us back to London. So there's been lots of talk about HSBC and other large banks moving away their headquarters from London. Are they actually going to do it, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, clearly, if you are principally an Asian bank and you've got major operations in Hong Kong, there is less logic for being in London. But then on top of that, you've got the things that HSBC are very concerned about, which is the ring fencing of the domestic operation, the bank levy, which is a UK-specific tax which impacts very badly on HSBC. And then there's a question of the UK's continuing membership of the European Union. They've said they'll take a decision before Christmas. They won't know about the European Union issue there, but I think the government will have to give way a little bit on the bank levy, and they'll have to see what the reality of the ring fencing is in order to decide whether they're best off in London or better off in Hong Kong.
How concerned do you think the UK government is about such a decision?
Well, I think they need to be very concerned because London's future as a financial centre, evolves around having banks like HSBC and Standard Chartered who are global players but choose to base their headquarters here. And if we're going to lose our competitive edge, that's going to be very serious going ahead.
Okay, so then one to watch for the future. Thank you, Brian.